Live coverage of Gamehold Con. This is, of course, D&D Beyond, and this is Mike Mearls, my personal dungeon master, both in the business world and in life.
Multi-class. He tells you how to live your life. I love it.
And this is Adam Bradford.
Yes, hello.
Who's the creator of D&D Beyond.
Sure.
Yeah.
There were a lot of other people that
it was just him in
created
his
also.
basement. It was really
Yes. So, Mike, thanks for joining us. You have things in your hands. I think
Yeah.
we're supposed to talk about
We've
these,
got
right?
stuff. We have cards. It's like this convention's all about cards for me.
Yeah.
So I've got, in one hand, I got Dungeon Mayhem. It's our
Which
new
is
game.
awesome.
Hashtag WotC staff. This is our new game that just came out. And then over here, I have a Taroka deck. So did you guys play through Curse of Strahd at all?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you might remember the Taroka deck kind of helps foretell your future.
It does.
I've been using it here at the convention. I run a dungeon delve where I do a drawing from the Taroka deck, and that determines the traps, the monsters, like the sort of boss creature in the crypt. So as we go, as you play and explore and you reveal more of the crypt, I draw more cards to determine what you face.
I see.
And what I've learned...
I see an evil plan for him.
Completely randomized.
I've run about like 4 hours a day of this, and what I find, I can now scientifically conclude that after 12 hours of play, only one group tried to talk to anything they met. In the
Everything
crypt. No,
was
just
combat.
everything else. Everyone else is
just
just
all
like,
combat.
you see a shape in the I stab it. Like, okay, there we go, Dungeons and Dragons.
That must be convention play, though, right?
I don't know. I think it's just if you put someone in a crypt and you describe it as being pretty creepy, and you're drawing from. Let's see the stuff from the Taroka deck. It's not like the cards are like smiling ice cream man, right? They are things.
would
We need that card, though.
The miser. I mean, I doubt you guys can come in, but this is a pretty creepy looking guy with a treasure chest.
Yeah. Of course you kill the old man. You
Let's
find him
see.
in the
This
crypt.
is the charlatan. I don't know if you can see that, but it's a creepy guy with a little mask.
Yeah.
So these are not exactly drawings that inspire people to go, oh, let's talk to that.
Yeah,
You know?
That's true.
They're more kill it with fire types.
That is true.
I feel it's a little aggressive, but
So I saw as you were playing, though, that you have some tiles that you're kind of building out
That's
before
right.
them as well.
So what I do is I have dungeon tiles I lay out, so the layout's different each time. And what I also found is, so the idea was, if you're kind of familiar with this idea of procedurally generated dungeons, right?
Right.
If you played like a roguelike or anything like that, what I have found is that if you include a mummy on your random monster generator and a wall of fire in your terrain, the mummy will always be spawned behind the wall of fire. Always. So I actually removed the mummy from my table because I just kept getting that poor mummy roasted alive. And if there's a wizard, an evil, like a necromancer guy who spawns behind the wall of fire, rather than being safe there, because I allow spellcasting to the wall of fire,
Right.
the party cleric always has silence and always drops it on the area the wall of fire is protecting, so the poor necromancer has to walk through his own wall of fire
Right.
to cast spells.
But these are
So-
some, nice tactics that people
Exactly.
can...
I reward people, right? It's just sort of funny to see how, you see this sort of random thing you're putting together. It's a little engine you build and you wind it up and let it go. But it does things you don't really expect.
that's a great new product right there. That's like a little version of you, like action figure Mearls.
Yeah.
Actually,
And you wind him up and
you
he's
hit
just
the-
like,
it just goes-
wall of fire.
backpack or whatever, like on
Yeah.
the G.I. Joe figures,
Oh, yeah.
Viper's attack.
right?
Yeah.
If I'm at work, it just goes and asks you if you're on deadline or not. And if it's at home, then it just goes and lets the dog out every 10 minutes because the dog.
Mike
always wants
Mearls
to
with
go out.
deadline grip.
Yeah.
Very nice.
It's just a wagging finger.
What would you say out there for dungeon masters that are running at home? How do random encounters work in your game? How do you use randomization?
I like to use it to keep the game interesting, actually, for me. Because what I like to think of is that it's very easy for the dungeon master to just create a story and say, here's the plot, A, B, C, D, E. But for me, randomness is what keeps me on my toes. So if you watch, remember the game I ran last night, the stream, there's at one point the party meets a goblin who could, if they trust him, which is a bad idea as a goblin, but he could lead them to the monster's lair and actually lead them to a secret entrance.
Right.
An entrance the monsters don't expect you to come through. And the party killed him. Right? Now,
Yes, they did.
It would be easy for me to just say, well, now the adventure kind of ends, but what I sort of do whenever I think of a choke point like that, I always think of the fail state as just leading you to a more potentially dangerous path rather than just stopping things.
Yeah.
So in that case, the characters had to essentially enter a skill challenge. I had them making survival rolls to see could they find the path. They ended up failing it actually horribly, and that's when the dragon showed up. They were traveling in a way that they're pretty conspicuous in the mountain. The dragon spotted them. But if they had succeeded, they could have found the main entrance into the dungeon. So the randomness to me is, a lot of times people think when they think pass-fail, rather than easy path, moderate path, like hard path, the randomness, can be scary. You would think it's going to end in a situation where you're just cornered, there's nowhere to go. If you always just try to think, I always try to think in terms of 3 outcomes.
Right.
But none of them ending things, they are just taking you to a more dangerous path. They could end things in the sense you might get into a fight.
Right.
Like, let's say if the party last night decided to attack the dragon, then it probably would have been a pretty awkward, I don't know if I could have recovered from that easily. But
that would be if Bilbo Baggins failed terribly.
Exactly. But the idea is to, and that's where I think embracing randomness is fun for me, because I don't know which path you're going to end up, and then especially when you add on different layers of the different paths mingling to see how things come together.
When you're dungeon mastering for a very long time, but all of us have been dungeon mastering for a very long time, do you I get overly excited about chaos. So I will come up with this elaborate plan or whatever and this idea, and when my players burn this to the ground, we talk about this a lot, I'm never more happy than when my plans are destroyed. Are you panicking? Are you at that point?
Oh yeah, I love it when the players go in a random direction.
Yeah, and then you just have to think on the fly.
Exactly.
Well, you have to think about it that the players, as they're being presented this world, everything is new to them.
Exactly.
If you're a dungeon master, you're prepping, you're thinking through different scenarios.
Right.
And when that happens, that is when it becomes new to you as a dungeon master.
Exactly. And that's why I like to, in my prep, I like to think of environments, and I think of characters not by their actions, but by their attitudes and desires. And that helps me think a little more flexibly. So if I think okay, the master criminal is going to try to rob this bank. If that gets foiled or something happens, I don't really necessarily have an obvious way out. If I just think this is a character really driven by greed and just looking for the best opportunity to make money the easiest way, then that helps me think more reactively. The players do something, I can think, well, now what's this NPC thinking? How are they going to react? Does he send an emissary? Does he try to ambush and kill them? Let's say if they foil the bank robbery, or they plant a fake gem, so when he sends his thieves in, he ends up with it's worthless. My plan's been foiled. I've even done things where I'll use a lot of ability checks for NPCs. So in my home game, we're playing through the Forge of Fury, and the players, if you are familiar with that adventure, the first level is kind of this orc there, and there's this ogre who is their leader. The players picked off a number of the orc sentries, and as they're exploring, I just made a random check to see, does the ogre walk around and check on the sentries? And he did, and they had hid the bodies. So I then had to make an intelligence check to see, can this ogre, with his 8 intelligence, figure out what happened?
Well enough, yeah.
And he blew the check. So I know, okay, the truth was, the orcs were killed, the body's hidden, but since he got a 3 on his intelligence check, he concludes, oh, these servants, they must have abandoned me. So rather than the players went deeper in the dungeon, actually some of the monsters have been pulled out to go search for these traitors. And so it's kind of just, again, kind of framing the NPC and what do they want, how might they react, and I really like using ability checks for NPCs. It also gives me an excuse if you're dealing with an 18 intelligence NPC that they can figure out the player's plans. Things like that. I can roll oh, you got a 15, so he has he has 2/3 of your plan figured out that I'll let him react to and counter. But there's going to be a piece he's going to miss.
That's a really good rule for new dungeon masters as well, because sometimes you can be no, this is my arch mastermind. He's always going to figure out what you're going to think of. No, give your villain plenty of opportunities to fail.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to players, though, especially with social checks and stuff like that, do you allow players if they're just acting their heart out with deception and persuasion? Do you still make them do a check?
I do sometimes, but what I do is I kind of go back to the idea of the moving forward but at a disadvantage, moderate path, upper path. I'll just frame things and shift them over. So for the game last night, I think there was at one point the players are terrorizing some goblins, and then they'd killed one, turning it to ice, and then went to make an intimidation check. And so what I thought to myself was, okay, 10 or less, they're going to get the basic success for intimidate. 11 to 20, they'll get the bonus success. And at 20 or higher, essentially, the goblin just does whatever they want. They can command it. So again, I just shift that frame of success so that if you do a good job role playing or you have a good plan, I just eliminate maybe what the disastrous failure or even the basic failure scenario to just reward players for being.
I'm just gonna write all this down just so I can. I'm just gonna figure out the.
I want to see you type on the phone. Fast enough. Yeah.
Okay, so I have a 20% chance of
Yeah, you could just hit the record button, or maybe watch the VOD.
Weird.
So let's talk a little bit about Dungeon Mayhem.
So Dungeon Mayhem, this is our new card
So I played
game.
this for the first time this weekend.
It was so
and
good.
I have to admit that I hate card games. I really hate card games.
So you're a hard sell.
I really enjoyed this. It is
Excellent.
very simple, straightforward, fast, Like,
Yeah.
playing an entire game is very, very fast. What?
And
First
he
of all,
died right away, and he still enjoyed
yeah,
it.
they picked on
killed
me.
him.
All 3 of the people playing came after me first, and they put me down. But I still had fun.
It's a very political game. So the concept behind it is we have 4 adventurers. You take the role of one of these 4 kind of heroes. One of them's a Red Wizard of Thay, so they're a little. And you are having
Misunderstood.
a brawl. Yeah, you're having a brawl, and it could be like you're fighting over the treasure. You could just be in a tavern. You don't like each other. And then the idea is you're playing cards to attack each other, to defend. You want to set up a defense. Each character has class-specific sort of tricks they can play, and you're going until there's only one character left standing. And it's a very political game because you always want to be like, you don't want to be too strong because then people gang up on you.
Right.
But you don't want to be so weak that people try to pick you up.
Is that what it was? I was too strong? And so you all decided to gang up on me. That was it.
Yeah.
Made me feel better about it anyway. I love it, though, because you were playing a wizard,
yeah.
but
So good.
Shelly was playing a rogue. And so as she was playing this rogue, she had one card, and I noticed it because the cards are so flavorful. She put one
So
down,
D&D themed.
and it was like, throw one dagger,
Yep.
and then she did another one a little bit later that was throw all the daggers. And it's just every card is comedy.
Cool, excellent. Well, no, and that's what we're going for, something really light, something fun, especially you can play with kids. It's really kind of the perfect game. Roscoe and Jordan, the 2 designers, they work at Wizards. They actually work on the sales team, and this is a card game they had played.
Wow.
They do a lot of volunteering with Big Brothers Big Sisters. And so they wanted to make a game that they could play with the kids they're working with. And so that was kind of their starting point. Something very fun, light, and again, the kids really like the kind of backstabbing and the conniving and stuff. It's fun to be a kid,
Of
right?
course
You like that
they
stuff.
do.
Yeah.
It's fun,
Looking at you, sons. Yeah.
And so that's where it really came up, and they really, they did a lot of the mechanical design, and I helped them refine things and kind of bring a little bit of theme into it. And we decided straight away we wanted to do something that was very lighthearted. It would be funny each time you're playing a card.
Yeah.
It was something that was.
Oh yeah, I mean, like when you cast, I was constantly casting Vampiric Touch. So the switching, what it does in the game is it switches your health with someone you choose. So you can just watch someone just build up all their health, and you could be a 1 hit point and just reverse it, and it's so satisfying.
Yeah, it was incredible. So we've got 4 heroes or possibly anti-heroes here.
Yeah.
I mean, there's got to be room for
Yeah, there's gotta be
expansion,
room.
right?
I can't talk about future projects, but I wouldn't be surprised to see.
See a warlock in there.
if we did some expansions with some similarly colorful characters of dubious intent.
I have a great idea for warlock. He's 6'5". He's very pale, has a beard.
Should we take a photo for reference? Right now?
Yeah.
No.
So, Mike, apparently there are a couple of other Dungeons and Dragons products that came out also yesterday.
Oh yeah.
Do you know anything about those?
So we have Guildmasters Guide to Ravnica, and then we have Waterdeep, Dungeon of the Mad Mage, that both came out. Now they are for Wizards Play Network stores. Get early release access to them. So the Dungeon of the Mad Mage details Undermountain for the first time in 5th edition. So it's a perfect companion to Dragon Heist if your characters are already moving around in Waterdeep.
Yeah.
So it kind of moves from 5th level all the way, right?
All the way up to 20. Yep.
Yeah.
So basically the dungeon is kind of set up where you can kind of, how much risk you want to take. But it's a very dangerous place.
Yes.
Right? Once we decided to kind of start at 5th level, though you could bring in lower level characters. If you're cautious, you can survive those sort of entry areas. But you have to be very
Brave.
cautious. Yeah.
If you're really
foolhardy.
mean DM,
Yeah.
just drop a couple of level 1s in there.
Yeah, I think it'd be
you need
interesting
to be
try it.
You need to be really charismatic.
That's
It would
old
be a
school
really
D&D,
good, yeah.
you know?
That's a challenge there. Yeah, I like that.
It'd be like a Descent the movie in a way.
And then Guildmasters Guide, for the first time, we officially in a hardcover product are bringing the universe of Magic the Gathering, the multiverse, into the D&D rules set. So Ravnica is the city of guilds. It's a plane of a world of one massive city. And there are a number of guilds that are competing for power. What you find, where the book sort of starts is this idea that there's the guild pact that keeps the guilds in balance. And that has been suspended. Jace, the planeswalker, who embodied the guild pact, has disappeared. And so now the guilds are all plotting against each other. And what I really like about it is, what the team did with it is this idea that when you make a character, essentially in place of picking a background, you pick the guild that your character is a member of, which helps give you some guidelines in making your character, has suggestions for race and class, and then builds in, like the backgrounds do in core D&D, your connections to the world. And then the Dungeon Master, your first session, there is an adventure you can run, a pre-made adventure that gets your campaign started at first level. And the idea is you can run that adventure for a couple sessions, and meanwhile, as a dungeon master, you can take the guilds the players chose and use those to inform how you're going to build your campaign. So you can pick which guilds would make natural enemies for the player character group, regardless of which guilds they picked. And that'll then, each guild comes with ideas for what kind of plots, what kind of storylines you can pursue with it, what that guild's goals are, what kind of conspiracies it might launch, depending on the nature of the guild, to seize more power. And that sets up the players as agents of their guilds to oppose that guild's plans.
And that's randomizable, right?
Yeah.
There are some tables, I can't remember off the top of my head the extent to which you can randomize that.
Yeah, there is definitely some.
But it feels more...
It's a really interesting approach.
And it feels not only like a setting, but also almost like another Dungeon Master's Guide in some ways.
Yeah, it's really what we're aiming for.
Yeah.
And that's definitely something where we want to learn from as we look at doing more settings and books that deal with regions or types of campaigns. We're going to look to see the reaction to this setup and see what we can do to build on it.
Yeah, because you never know, right? Like, especially with this product, you're bringing in Magic players, hopefully, to D&D for the first time.
Yeah.
So it would be very nice of you to like give them some tips for dungeon mastering
exactly.
and being a player and stuff.
And that idea of using the factions as your storytelling lens.
Yeah.
You can imagine a setting like Dark Sun, using things like with Sorcerer Kings or different flavor, the different plots they'd be involved with. If the players are
We
members
certainly
of
could imagine.
Exactly. But you can think if you're a member of Slave Tribe versus maybe you're a merchant house, things like that, how
Right.
your campaign might look. A lot of our settings work really well when you look at it through that lens. So it's definitely something where we're going to take notes on the reaction and see what we can build on.
What are your thoughts? So Xanathar's Guide to Everything, of course, had almost half the book was dungeon mastering, and then the other half of the book was very player focused. Subclass options primarily, some feats. This book appears to have it really is trying to touch on almost all of the things.
Yeah.
So after you gauge the reaction here, is this where we're saying that future products could potentially fit into a mold where it's a little more all-in-one?
Yeah, because that's something we like, is this idea that if you have the core rule books and you're using an expansion, you just need one more book.
Okay.
We don't want to put players in the position of feeling like I need to buy 3 books to actually use this one book.
Right.
And one of the nice things about Guildmasters Guide is there is the one adventure that's in there. But we often hear players will say, well, as a player, I don't want to buy, say, Dungeon of the Mad Mage, because I'm going to see the adventure ahead of time. So what we wanted to do with this product was, while there's the one adventure, it's really aimed at first level. So you might, if you're thinking of buying the book, maybe, it's going to be just a couple sessions and you've played it. You are seeing the tools the DM's using, but you're not seeing the DM's end result. So it isn't spoilers, to see if you own the book as a player and have read the entire thing, other than the one adventure. The rest of it is just tools. It's like owning the DMG as a player. It doesn't tip you off as to what the DM's campaign's about. You don't know about the adventure. You just know more about the optional rules and the rules for magic items. So that's one thing where we think it makes it easier for players. We've heard that feedback, that players don't like to mix like a campaign adventure with player options.
Right.
Because it just feels like they're cheating.
Right.
Plus, just in terms of the value, if you're not going to run the adventure, does it feel like a good purchase to you as a player? So.
Right. Yeah, I can see that. Like you don't want to buy a book and just get like a page of player options.
Yeah, exactly.
That kind of thing happening.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite part of Dungeon of the Mad Mage?
I reviewed the early manuscripts. That was really Chris Perkins running it. I played Undermountain many years ago, but I am not familiar with this product in detail. I know the generals of it, but I intentionally, because I was hoping to play.
Oh,
So
nice.
intentionally try either that, or I will break down and just run it myself.
Yeah.
But so I was trying to keep a little bit of arm's length from the getting into the details of the content.
Gotta get Perkins or someone to run it for you. Then
Yeah,
that'll be
more
perfect.
D&D.
Yeah,
I'm only
it'll be a lot
playing
of
8
fun.
hours a day here at Gamehole, so I need to keep that up.
I need to make then I'm forcing you to make a hard choice. You have to, between Druid of the Spores or the Order domain, which do you like?
Order. I actually have, there's an
not a hard choice.
Yeah, no,
apparently.
not choice at all, right? I love the Order Domain Cleric, and that's something which in my current campaign, we have a Centaur Order Domain Cleric who's actually converted the entire party to the worship of his deity.
Oh, nice.
Well, because it's just
That seems very orderful.
Well, the magic's been pretty useful, so
He's been really like just wearing them down and convincing them.
Proselytizing,
saving their lives, and,
Like how dark has it gone? He's like, well, I could heal you, but
No, it's been things like, oh, you would have missed, but you had the bless spell. So,
So no
pretty
Inquisition.
useful,
It was-
yeah. Or
it's-
like, I'm going to buff you and you get to attack. Oh, and then I drop an enemy with that. Oh, that's pretty this magic.
I don't know how I feel about Cocky Centaur.
Yeah.
I think that's about all the time that we have. We've got to get ready for the next session. We've got
That's
the
right.
Adventures League admins.
Awesome.
And Matthew Lillard's going
Yeah,
to join them.
I didn't know he was at the
oh my
shows.
goodness, he
Yeah.
is crashing the shot apparently. That's him. Oh no, this is supposed to be PG-13. All right.
That's still PG. That's still PG-13.
Thank you so much for joining
Thanks
us
for having
tonight.
me.
We really
Great
appreciate it.
time.
We will take a short break, and then we will be back with the AL admins plus Matthew Lillard. Thanks. See you soon.
See ya.